It's 1970. You're a U.S. Army soldier stationed in Vietnam. You've been here 8 months. You've watched friends die. You've stopped sleeping properly. And somewhere between the jungle and the body bags, someone handed you a cigarette that wasn't tobacco. Now, you can't stop. The heroin flooding the barracks is almost pure. Purer than anything back home. Cheaper, too. And nobody seems particularly interested in stopping it. What you don't know, what almost nobody knows, is where it's coming from. Or who's moving it. Confirmed. By the early 1950s, the CIA has a problem. The communist bloc is expanding. China has fallen. Korea is bleeding. And across Southeast Asia, Washington is watching dominoes line up. The agency needs to operate in places it cannot officially be. It needs supply lines, extraction routes, and the ability to move men and materials without leaving fingerprints. So it builds an airline. On paper, Civil Air Transport is a private cargo company operating out of Taiwan. In reality, it is wholly owned and operated by the Central Intelligence Agency. Planes, pilots, logistics, all of it. The pilots are Americans. Most are veterans of World War II. They are good at flying into places nobody else will. That is exactly why they were hired. Civil Air Transport will later be renamed Air America. For the next 2 decades, it will become one of the largest covert operations in CIA history, flying troops, weapons and supplies across some of the most dangerous airspace on Earth. At its peak, it operates over 200 aircraft and employs thousands of staff. Officially, it does not exist. Unofficially, everyone in the region knows exactly who runs it, but the cargo manifests are where things get complicated. There is a region where the borders of Burma, Laos, and Thailand converge. It sits high in the mountains, remote and ungoverned. For centuries, the people living there have grown one crop better than almost anywhere else on Earth: opium. By the 1950s, this region, the Golden Triangle, produces the majority of the world's illicit heroin supply. The trade is controlled not by cartels in the Western sense, but by local warlords, ethnic militias, and, crucially, remnants of the Chinese Nationalist Army who fled into Burma after losing the civil war to Mao's communists. These men are called the KMT, the Kuomintang. The CIA needs them. Washington's logic is straightforward, if brutal. The KMT are already in Burma, already armed, already organized, and already deeply hostile to communist China. The agency begins funneling weapons and supplies to them. The goal is to use them as a destabilizing force, a splinter in Beijing's side. Air America is the delivery mechanism. Planes land on jungle airstrips, crates go down, something else comes up. Here is the problem no one in Washington wants to say out loud. The KMT's primary revenue source is opium. Without opium money, they cannot function, and without KMT cooperation, the CIA's entire regional strategy unravels. So a decision is made, not in a memo, not in a meeting anyone would ever admit attending. The CIA looks the other way, and then it does something worse. This is Alfred McCoy. In 1972, he is a 28-year-old PhD student at Yale. He travels to Southeast Asia to research the opium trade for his doctoral dissertation. He interviews pilots, warlords, village chiefs, and intelligence officers. What he finds is so explosive that the CIA attempts to suppress the book before publication. They fail. The politics of heroin in Southeast Asia lands like a grenade. McCoy's central argument is this: the CIA did not merely tolerate the drug trade in the Golden Triangle, it actively facilitated it. Air America aircraft transported opium on behalf of CIA-backed warlords. warlords. The agency provided air transport that the drug lords could not otherwise access. In Laos specifically, the CIA's key military partner is a man named Vang Pao. He is a general in the Royal Lao Army and the leader of the Hmong people. He is also one of the largest opium producers in the region. The CIA needs Vang Pao badly. He commands an army of 30,000 fighters, holding back the North Vietnamese and the Pathet Lao communists. Without him, northern Laos falls. So the agency supplies him, funds him, and arms him, and his opium moves. Former Air America pilots later speak on the record, not all of them, but enough. They describe landing on remote strips and being told not to ask questions about certain cargo. They describe bags and crates loaded by men they didn't recognize.
By the late 1960s, American troops in Vietnam are consuming heroin at a rate that shocks military commanders. A 1971 report commissioned by the Pentagon finds that approximately 15% of US servicemen in Vietnam are addicted to heroin. Some estimates run higher. The drug is cheap, available everywhere, and extraordinarily pure, around 90 to 96% purity, compared to the 5 to 10% typically found on American streets. That purity is the fingerprint, Southeast Asian heroin, golden triangle product. A congressional investigation led by Representative Robert Steele concludes that the heroin epidemic among US troops is directly connected to the Southeast Asian supply chain. Steele does not stop there. He names the CIA's involvement as a factor in the drug's availability. His report lands in Washington and largely disappears. Nixon declares a war on drugs. He calls heroin public enemy number one. His administration funds treatment programs. It pressures Turkey, another major opium source, to reduce production. Not once does it seriously investigate the supply chain running through its own covert operations. The soldiers come home. Some bring their addiction with them. Heroin follows. Cities that had never seen the drug at scale are suddenly flooded with it.
In 1975, Saigon falls. The war is over. Air America is dissolved the following year. Its aircraft are sold off, its pilots scatter, its records are classified. The Church Committee, a landmark Senate investigation into CIA abuses, examines the agency's covert operations in exhaustive detail. Assassinations, coups, domestic surveillance. The committee documents decades of illegal activity. The drug trafficking question is raised. It is not resolved. The CIA's Inspector General later conducts internal reviews. The conclusions are carefully worded. Evidence of direct institutional involvement remains, according to official findings, unsubstantiated. What is not disputed is this. The CIA knowingly worked with drug lords. It provided them with resources, protection, and legitimacy. It chose not to interfere with their primary revenue source, because that revenue source was funding operations Washington needed. Whether that constitutes the CIA running drugs depends entirely on where you draw the line between tolerance and participation. The pilots who flew those routes drew the line differently. McCoy spent the rest of his career documenting what he found in those mountains. Decades of research, additional books, and a tenure at the University of Wisconsin. His core findings have never been successfully refuted, only ignored. In 1998, the CIA's Inspector General released a report acknowledging that the agency had failed to report drug trafficking by its assets to the Justice Department, a legal obligation.
There is something specific about the Air America story that resists easy conclusions. The pilots were not drug traffickers in any conventional sense. Many believed they were serving their country. The warlords were not cartels manufacturing misery for profit alone. They were men fighting for survival in a Cold War proxy conflict that ground up everyone it touched. And the CIA was not run by cartoon villains. It was run by people who had made a calculation, a brutal consequentialist calculation, that winning the Cold War mattered more than what happened to the crop in the hills. They were wrong. The heroin that came home killed American soldiers twice, once in the jungles of Vietnam, once in the cities they came back to. Air America's last flight was in 1976. The drug trade it helped sustain outlasted it by decades.